So, Shooting an Elephant by George Orwell. Let's talk a little bit more specifically about what's going on in terms of the context that leads into this. And again, I've got links in Brightspace. You can go to this fact sheet and details about British rule of Burma. This NPR interview, it's a transcript of it, not the video, of someone who's written an article or a book, I think, about Orwell's experiences in Burma. And then this last thing is something that he wrote not long after he had come back, and he had written this story about what's going on in Burma. Okay, so if you look to the sides here of this handout, you're going to see some information, some resources. There's some pictures here, but at the very end is actually the first part of this whole package. I've repackaged it so it's a little bit easier. This is some background that you can read that's actually about what's going on. All right, so in 1840 something, Britain was well established in India. Right, they'd been there since at least the 1700s, and next door was Burma. And Burma was becoming a problem. The monarch at the time was highly despotic and quite cruel. And so Britain was very concerned about his regime. Burma was also a fairly aggressive country, that they themselves practiced imperialism, if you will, that they had no compunction about taking over a neighboring district or area to add to their own power. So they had a standing army. I'm not sure how well armed they were, with lots of weapons in terms of guns and all that, but they actually, had an army and they used it, right? So Britain was a little concerned about what was going over there. The other thing that they were concerned about was that they were trying to find a way to build a trade route to China so that they could export their stuff and trade and all that and make more money. Burma, they thought, would be a nice shortcut straight through that they could go to China. That ended up not actually happening, but that's what they were hoping for. So with that in mind, they decided they were going to take over Burma. And so between 1840 something and late 1860s, we had three Anglo-Burmese wars where the Burmese kept fighting against the British. But about 1868, the British won decisively, and they began dismantling the government and the religious networks of the country. So the first thing they did, they deposed the monarch, Thibwe, I think his name was, and he had to flee the country. And then they broke down the Buddhist monasteries. Now, before, the monasteries and the monarchy worked hand in hand. Right? The monarchy would help support the monasteries and the monks. They would give them money and they would provide, political support. And in return, the monks helped educate the people. They were very much active in deciding policy and that kind of stuff. So all of a sudden, the king is gone, and these monks no longer have the money, but also they no longer have a say in the government. And so obviously they were not very happy about that. And then you also had all of this military and the tribal headsmen and the royalty, the nobles, that were also out of a job, so to speak, right? So in order to help diffuse their ability to maybe get together and work together, Britain also started uprooting families and moving them to different areas. So you might have, your family central of power might be in the north, and all of a sudden Britain takes your family, they take your land and they force you to move all the way down to the south, right? So you have a lot of disruption here. Eventually, Britain brings in its own schools, and so children are being educated by Christian missionaries in a lot of places, but also being educated by Britain. So they're controlling, what these children are learning and the ideology and all that kind of stuff. And so this is also very disruptive. Burma had a lot of resources. They had a lot of ruby mines that Britain pretty much took all the stuff out of and profited from. They also had teak forests, the kind of wood, and elephants were usually used to help haul these big trunks of trees down for processing. And they had some acreage devoted to rice cultivation, but because Britain was thinking that this would be a great export, right, export it to China and all that, they actually required Burma to up the acres that were used in cultivating rice. I think, if I'm right, it went from like 4 million to 10 million or something like that. That's a big conversion there. And what happened is that these farmers, these Burmese landowners, had to take out loans to pay for the expansion. And they were having to mainly get loans from these East Indian, basically loan sharks that had really bad conditions in terms of the contract. And so a lot of these Burmese farmers were either foreclosed on or evicted. So you have these people who no longer have a means. They no longer have homes, right? You have lots of people out of work. And one of the things that's also happening is you have a lot of East Indians that are immigrating to Burma. These are Indians that in their own country would not have the social status to actually make a lot of money or be advanced and get really good jobs, right? So they're fleeing from their country to Burma, hoping that they can land better jobs, right, for some of them. And that's what happens. The British don't bring a whole lot of British troops to Burma. Instead, they have, a small cadre of supervisors. But then what they do is they put Indian officials in those other jobs, right? But then you also have a bunch of low wage workers that are coming in, and they're taking jobs for wages that are very much lower than what the Burmese would work for. And so now, the Burmese have, I think at one point they said about 250,000 Indians were immigrating a year to a country of 13 million. So you can see that that's actually quite a lot of people.